Item J1 is to receive a presentation from Richmond residents who have formed a working group to reimagine public safety and have been meeting regularly since July.
Yeah, let me frame it real briefly, and then we've got some residents that will present. As folks know, and we were reminded today as we were talking about the budget, when we passed our budget in June, this council also committed right after that to take a look at how do we deal with policing in the city of Richmond, and what are the long-term things, changes that we may want to make in terms of reimagining public safety. And so we made the decision, instead of sort of doing something big at that moment, to say that we're gonna actually look at this and try to get people together and really have serious conversations about how we reimagine public safety and what we want public safety and policing to look like in our city. So as part of the motion that we passed in June, there was supposed to be a task force that was created. Because of administrative reasons, that didn't happen as quickly as it was supposed to. But I know that there's a official task force that's in the process of being created now, and that's going to go forward fairly soon, which is great. But in the meantime, residents just took it up on their own to start meeting, going over the different, facts that they could find, and really discussing ideas. And folks have been having those meetings, I think weekly. I think maybe even some of them twice a week, because I know they've been meeting with me as well as meeting on their own since the beginning of July. And so this is an opportunity for those folks to present to the council and to the public about what they've already sort of seen. This is not an action item. I'm not going to be suggesting that we take any action tonight, but there will be suggestions here. Some suggestions that are things that the council may be able to do within the next couple of months. Some suggestions may be things that require, more time than the council may want to look at for the long term. And some of them may be things that we decide aren't appropriate for the city of Richmond. But there's a number of suggestions, all of which I think took a lot of thought. And with that, I think I would like to allow the speakers to make their presentation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Randy Joseph. I am a resident of Richmond. I'm also I'm on the Richmond Police Community Review Commission as one of the commissioners, and one of the people that have been working with this Richmond Reimagining Public Safety Working Group. We have been working since before June. So we've been doing this for a little while, and we came together to try to find solutions by looking at data and looking at best practices to come up with solutions that change what the idea of what public safety in Richmond and change practices and policies that's going on. Okay, so first off, our mission is to improve public safety in Richmond by employing a holistic approach that is grounded in human rights, responsive to human needs, and guided by the best available evidence. Who we are, we're community members, represented from community organizations, for example, RISE, Urban Healthy Richmond, and representatives from city groups, Community Police Review Commission, and the City of Richmond Community Service Department. Our methods that we use, we maximize community engagement in all of the fundamental components of the city public safety infrastructure. We increase transparency by expanding access to information, including program implementation and budgetary allocations. And we assure accountability by removing unnecessary barriers to addressing police misconduct. And how we broke it down is that we looked at all the issues that we had, and we decided to put things into 3 different subgroups. So the subgroups are alternative to policing, spending and funding, and police policies and procedures. And with that, I have 3 presenters, Shirley Leslie, Carlos Lemus, and Angelica Delgado, that will present from these 3 different subgroups that's happening tonight. So first up will be alternatives to policing and Shirley Leslie.
Thanks, Randy. Apologies for my terrible lighting, but hopefully you can still see my thumb. All right, so when thinking about alternatives to policing, the first question we need to ask, what is safety? And under that, safety for whom? Are we trying to promote safety for unhoused folks in Richmond? Are we trying to ensure safety for Black and Brown folks in Richmond? And safety also means getting a lot of our basic needs met. So food, housing, healthcare, which includes mental and behavioral healthcare, education, pathways to meaningful employment, and responses to harm. So really thinking about prevention and response. So we wanted to uplift this graph that we saw on Transparent Richmond regarding the top 10 call types to police that involved any use of force. So that is from 2015 to now. And as you can see, mental crisis is the top call. So an action item we're bringing to you all, having a non-police response to behavioral health crisis. And so we're defining our terms. What do we mean by behavioral health? That includes mental health, substance use, and the impact of both mental health and substance use on unhoused communities. So why do we need a non-police response? Well, police presence creates fear and escalates the situation. And policing and behavioral health crisis response are completely different roles. And in all of these conversations, we want to uplift PD Perez and folks who have been harmed by policing. So a lot of existing models that we've been looking to include Cahoots in Eugene, Oregon, Mental Health First, which started at the top of the year in Sacramento and just started in Oakland. The Macro program, which is also in Oakland, and then the Psychiatric Ambulance and Mobile Therapy in Stockton, Sweden. So we have a lot of principles of the new program we're proposing. It has to be responsive, has to be focused on de-escalation, has to be peer-led, a very limited engagement with police, supportive and not criminalizing, part of a larger network of care, sustainable and accountable. So this program would have to be immediately responsive to community calls, and staffers should be responding at least as quickly as the police are currently responding to calls. And have a huge focus on de-escalation. So staffers should primarily be trained in de-escalation as a response to harm. This also has to be peer-led. So staff have to be folks with direct experience of mental health crisis and or homelessness who are very firmly entrenched in our Richmond communities, not looking to outsiders with academic credentials. Again, being very limited in any engagement with police. So there needs to be a clear protocol about how and when this new response team is going to contact the police so that it's not just another avenue for RPD to access our folks in community. Additionally, police should not be interfering with the functioning of these programs. So this needs to be focused heavily on support and not criminalization. So the program would need to focus on providing community resources and actually trying to facilitate healing without preventing future harm. So this program should not be looking to identify laws that are being broken or attempting to criminalize folks. It needs to be part of a bigger network of care. So having it be very connected with existing community services, and there are a lot here in Richmond. So this program needs to connect residents with ongoing supports and needs to have really deep relationships with those services. This also needs to be sustainable. So not just receiving a one-time grant from the city, but receiving continuous funding and support. And it also needs to be accountable. So being very transparent with community members about the inner workings of the program and providing the community with information about the impact of the work. And relatedly, if harm is occurring between any staff or volunteers, they'll be removed from service without pay. So examples of community services that already exist here in Richmond: Bay Area Community Resources, the Kaiser Crisis Center, Community Health for Asian Americans, Catholic Charities of the East Bay, La Familia Counseling Services, Healing Circles of Hope, Yanima Healing Circles, Native American Health Center, RISE, Community Violence Solutions, Greater Richmond Interfaith Program, La Clinica, Bay Area Rescue Mission, and Brookside Shelter. And the last thing the Alternatives to Policing group really wanted to uplift is that in all of this processing and looking at community models of care, just realizing that the city definitely needs to defer to the community for the thinking through and implementation of any new program. And that is it from me.
Okay. We're going to go now to spending and funding, the part of the subgroup, and that presentation will be made by Carlos Lemus.
Good evening, everybody. Carlos Lemus, project manager over at Healthy Richmond. and lifelong resident of Richmond. Thank you for having us tonight, and thank you to the public for being here. So first question that we asked ourselves is why look at funding? And, given the earlier presentations on the budget, I think it's very clear for our city why we are looking at the budget, but also, stepping back and thinking really that communities are interested in realizing a collective vision of, what safety means to our city, including the safety of the officers. And to do this, we are invested in understanding the current budgetary models in order to reinvent the methodology for creating the annual and mid-year budgets, and how to have communities involved in that process. And budgets are not just the financial documents, but they're also moral documents that demonstrate and reflect our values as the cities. And you as city leaders have been elected to represent that. So next slide. Goals. So number one goal is just learn, learn, and also teach each other. And that, that's part of the core reason why we're here is we hope that you are here, listen and learn from us of what we have to offer and what we have to say. But, when it comes to spending and funding on police, what we realize we need to learn from other cities who are currently decreasing funds for their police departments, and then comparing our budget to other cities that have this similar population size and similar traffic or patterns and other factors, and also how they make decisions. And we're always doing that here in the Bay Area, and I think this conversation is nationwide, but how are we having those conversations closely with different departments? And then increasing transparency and access to crucial information, not just raw data that regular residents, ordinary residents who are impacted by budgets can't understand and can't reflect and digest that information. We're grateful for models like the Transparent Richmond to have those things. And so we've been exploring that website fairly. And then incorporate diverse opinions and ideas in the budget process. We know there's ranging opinions and layers to these conversations. And so even in our own group, we're having different disagreements, but we're learning from each other and having that conversation. And our door is always open, and but we are, very leaning towards the community and for them to have that agency to really decide what safety means to them and us. So some questions that came up before we can just dive into this process. Some people aren't experts at even just getting involved in, there you go. In this whole process of coming to city councils, and then others are, very well into this topic and they're experts. And so some of the questions we had was, where does the police funding, where's it coming from? So citywide, we're having that conversation, but also state and federal funding. And then what is the money being spent on? So discretionary fund spending versus core expenses, which ones is for salaries, which ones are for cars, weapons, and technology, and so on. And then how much of our city budget goes to policing in comparison to other services? And what does this say about our city values? And so we've seen different percentages about how much funding goes towards the police department, but it's ranged between at least 41% up towards 49, 48%. And it really depends what year you're looking at it and if you're looking at it in the past 10 years. And, some of the things we've also learned is that the police department has started to cut some of their positions and other parts of their department. And so we're also trying to be sensitive to that when we're advocating for ourselves. And then, so nearly half is what we're saying. And so half of our taxpayers' money is going to police is kind of the conclusion from that point. How are overtime hours being used? And that's been a topic from police departments and their presentations. So we've just been interested in also just police officers being out there, and that's been a concern of the community as well, and how effectively they can do their job if they are having to do those kind of cuts. And then what impact does the funding structure, such as when officers are under investigation, what are those forms of accountability having an impact on the community, and for justice when there is investigation and criminal activity. Next slide. So action items for the council, up to you all to see which ones interest you, but we've said city-led budget transparency, education sessions, again, explaining the budget in plain English, but I think also Spanish as well. I noticed the city council isn't in Spanish and the school district is in Spanish, so that's a big contrast for me being on this meeting. Community Q&As, that's already been happening in different spaces. Comparison of budget actuals and call reports. And then mid-year budget review process, what does that look like when there's changes that need to be made to the budget at some point throughout the year? No RPD budget increases until reimagining public safety process is complete. Complete analysis of RPD, overtime use and spending, consideration of implementing liability insurance models for police misconduct settlements, and then implementation of participatory budget process for the fiscal year of 2022 budget. And
then last and not least, police policies procedures. Presenting will be Angelica Delgado.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Angelica Delgado, and I'm presenting on behalf of the Police Policies and Procedures subgroup. So we really want to start by really looking at existing opportunities within the Community Police Review Commission, which will abbreviate in the presentation as CPRC, and the role that they can really play around reimagining and redefining public safety in Richmond. One of the ways that they can do this is by providing community control over the police, which is defined as active citizen or community involvement in policies, hiring, training, and oversight of police. Another way this can be done is by aiding the police in communicating information to the community and increasing confidence that the police are liable to the community by being a transparent pathway to reporting and creating trust in the process.
Hold on.
Please.
Got it. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, on the heels of that, one of the action items that we want to share and present to you today is around really empowering the CPRC. And some of the ways this can be done is by adding sexual abuse investigations to CPRC responsibilities, granting CPRC right to independently investigate any potential police misconduct of which it becomes aware, adding CPRC representation to all panels considering hiring and promotion of police officers, and allowing CPRC to investigate confidential whistleblower complaints by individual police officers. Another action priority that's important to really consider in this conversation and think about is community and integrity-based hiring practices. This includes, new officers receiving training in Richmond history and culture, banning any officer from being hired in Richmond who have been fired from other departments found to be violent or affiliated with hate groups, and having CPRC representation involved in the hiring process. Another action priority area is around traffic violation protocols and procedures. This includes instituting a moratorium on traffic fees and fines during the COVID-19 pandemic. Also banning pretextual stops in Richmond, which is a stop in which an officer detains someone for a minor offense, such as a traffic violation, in order to investigate a separate and unrelated suspected criminal offense, which then gives officers wide discretion in who they choose to stop. And a third area we would like to share is around requiring written consent for all vehicle searches. And then lastly, another policy action item we want to share is around liability and standards of conduct. This includes penalties or instituting penalties for officers turning off body cameras and officers having guns locked away when out in the community doing patrols during community engagement and around young people. So essentially making sure that we institute a non-threatening community engagement practices in Richmond, California. And so just to wrap up this section, we just really want to share that there are models of substantial policy reform across the nation, one of them being Minneapolis. But in addition to that, we also have Camden, New Jersey, which has reorganized its police force, the state of Washington, which has banned pretextual stops, Fayetteville, Durham, and Chapel Hill, which require consent to search vehicles. And Richmond, California should be one of these models as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. So just wanted to give a quick summary of our short-term action items. This was on the screen. The budget increases to reimagine public safety process is complete. They empower the CPRC, banning previous violent officers who are part of hate groups, penalties for turning off body cameras, regulations around open and carrying of weapons, banning pretextual stops, moratorium of tracking fines and fees, and written consent for vehicle searches. And then the long-term action items. More budget transparency, mid-year budget review, analysis of overtime, a liability assurance model, and a participatory budget process for the 22 budget, training for new officers in Richmond for history and culture, development of non-police response to behavioral health crisis. We wanted to make sure that the community gets involved. We have a Facebook page. Please visit us on Facebook. We also have a survey that's coming out that will be attached on the Facebook page as well. We want community members of Richmond to fill it out because we want to hear from you. And then on Thursday, October 8th from 6 to 8 p.m., join our community forum that will be live on Facebook and other YouTube and other forums to have this conversation ongoing because this is a real community process and we want as much community input as possible. With that, we are done and we're open for questions.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have questions? Do I see any hands up? Put them up.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, sure.
I just want to address also, since the CPRC stuff was in here and it was originally on the agenda tonight, just so folks know, that was pulled off of the consent calendar, not because, no longer a lack of commitment, but just after a conversation with the city manager, so we want to sort of follow certain procedures in doing it. But so just so folks know, that's why that was pulled. But that conversation is still ongoing.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I have comments for after the public speakers. Short, but yeah.
We have additional public speakers besides the presenters. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we do. We have 7.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and call them?
Okay. The first 5 speakers are Sarah Cantor, Tania Pulido, Benjamin Terrial, and Yenny Garcia. Sarah, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Great, thank you so much. I am a resident of Richmond and I wanted to give my public comment in support of this presentation and in support of a Richmond that where public safety is looked at as providing for the needs of residents and making sure that everyone has what they need and no one needs to turn to crime in desperation rather than by criminalizing and punishing our residents who need the most. And I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Tania Pulido. Tania, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Good evening, Council. My name is Tania Pulido. I live and work in Richmond, and I also grew up in the city. I support the Reimagining Public Safety Community Group and their recommendations. They are doing important work in our city, and I'm thankful for their efforts. We all know that the police are limited in their scope of work, and we need non-police response groups to address issues that have become vicious cycles in our city, such as domestic violence, family remediation, mental health crises, and etc. I normalized over-policing at a young age, and it's been the only solution that has been consistently funded in the city. And I also worked at a youth center and have worked in youth development for many years. And through asking questions with youth, they still feel the same way I did when I was young. And the truth is that there's a lot of distrust towards the police and we need alternative response groups. And as stated by the Reimagine Safety Group, most of the calls are mental health crisis cases, and we are living in difficult times and are experiencing a mental health crisis at a national level. And given the status of the pandemic, it doesn't look like schools and other public institutions are going to open up anytime soon. And so right now is the time to invest in resources to assist with the symptoms of poverty and the pandemic. We need solutions that don't lead to a dead end, but that will offer resources for rehabilitation and healing. Please follow the leadership of this group of committed residents and leaders and people stepping up to the plate, and don't take their ideas for granted and listen actively. Thank you.
Yeah. My next speaker is Benjamin Theriault. Ben, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Hi, Ben Theriault, President of the Richmond Police Officers Association. Just want to touch base on a couple of these issues brought up. Quite frankly, I mean, the Reimagine icon in this context is kind of essentially being used as defund. Defund as a slogan's been a total loser nationally, and yet this is kind of locally what we're calling for. Year after year, we've seen Richmond Police Department specifically being held as the gold standard of progressive 21st century policing. The issues generated nationally get emphasized here for some reason, but for us, most of the issues are a solution looking for a problem. Number one, we do not criminalize mental health at Richmond PD. And on one of the listed goals in this presentation is to look at cities for what they have defunded. We'll look at Minneapolis, where defunding efforts have come to a complete halt and crime's out of control. The police pulled back with the funding of police services, and now all the elected officials who were in July calling for the abolition of their police department are calling for the opposite. Mental health is a county function. We are not Berkeley. We are not San Francisco. Even if you got rid of the entire police department, you cannot provide some of the services that those residents are fortunate enough to receive. This is where that needs to be addressed. And if you talk to clinicians in the county, they have a non-crisis response that is something that the police department is moving to, and quite frankly, could have a positive outcome. However, when you talk to the clinicians who are responding to people in crisis, they will tell you they will not respond without police. This is a county function, and it's something that we need to take up and receive funds from the county on. Number one job of government is safety. There is nothing else. It's in the California Constitution. It's written about in the city charter. We've worked hard to turn the ship around with violence in this city, and the police department's actually been defunded for the past few years, and we've seen a lot of swelling in violence as a result. Traffic stops, the class they called a pretextual stop. We are one of the worst cities per capita in the state of California with injury accidents. Most of those
Your time has expired. Thank you. My next speaker is Yanni Garcia. Yanni, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Yes, I just I want to show my support to the whole community as a whole. Just having this group organize and look at all the data and really think about a different approach on policing. I just want to urge city council members and the mayor to include this group because, our communities, when we're hurting, when we're in pain, we need to include the community. They know what needs to be changed. When other people start making other groups and they don't include the community that's actually being damaged, it's not okay. And I really, really hope that this group can work together with reimagining how policing will be. And, I urge the Richmond Police Department also to be open to listen, to reflect the changes that we're proposing. A lot of the things that we're proposing come because we have suffered. We are in pain. Our community is in pain. There has been people that have died. And we're trying really hard to make sure that our community lives longer, that there's no more youth out there dying. And, it really would help and encourage everyone if the RPD and the council and the group were just open to listen to each other and find solutions and support each other. That will really bring the community together. So I really hope that you all will support the people that are listening to, that you look at this from a different perspective and the goal of having public safety change in our city so that no one else feels the way that people have felt before with the police. We should feel comfortable with
Time
it.
has expired. Thank you. My next speaker is Kristen Killian Lobos, and the last two speakers after that are Mike Parker and Luis Chacon. I cannot get to Kristen, so I will take Mike right now. Mike, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Thank you. I think without a doubt, the Richmond police are far better than some of the police that we've been reading about in other areas of the country. And I think that that's largely because this community has worked on trying to improve police-community relations and change the policies of policing over the last 10 years. We've also done things like the Office of Neighborhood Safety as a different way of handling and dealing with crime. I think that what Ben Terrio is missing is what this committee is trying to say, which is that public safety, the safety of the public, is not simply the police or even primarily the police. The police only get in once we are unsafe. The idea is to figure out the things that will make the community safer for people so that the police are not required. The police are the bandages on a sickness. They are not the cure of the sickness. Now, this committee that's been meeting, and I've been a member of it, has involved about 50 people who have worked very hard over the last several months trying to grapple with all these questions with seriousness, understanding the different interests and so forth that's involved. I think they've done some marvelous work and that they will continue to do some. The big problem is we know that the public attention is fickle. And even though people are looking at policing issues right now, if we allow this thing just to simply be dragged out, what will happen is it'll go away and we'll go back to the institutionalized racism that we have in our city as well as in the rest of the country. So we have to make sure that the council doesn't just say, oh, this is nice and applaud it, but says, okay, now we're going to start moving on some of these things. We can take them up one at a time seriously, but we're going to take action. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will try Kristen. Give me a second. Kristen, to speak, you can go ahead and start.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Kristen Killian Lobos, and I'm a member of the Reimagining Public Safety Working Group. I'm a community activist here in Richmond, and I'm a recent graduate of the Health and Human Service program at Contra Costa College. And I did my clinical internship at Ujima Family Recovery Services here in Richmond. I became a counselor because I was already an outspoken advocate for more equity in the system of behavioral health care. And 8 years ago, the mobile crisis team in Berkeley helped my family in a life or death situation that ended with my loved one being successfully hospitalized and getting the care she needed. So even though we were a Richmond resident, we had a crisis on the street in Berkeley, and I didn't even know about the team, but they really helped us that day. Sadly, it's too easy to see who gets help and who gets arrested or harmed in these same kinds of crisis situations when no mobile team is available. If we look at the youth system, we currently have Black and brown youth are in the juvenile justice system, while the white youth are in programs in hospitals. What do they have in common? They have anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, trauma, child abuse, learning disabilities, complex trauma, and all of these things put youth at risk for substance use. Every town needs a non-police response for all 911 calls related to substance use or mental health crisis. Too many people in the Bay Area and all over the country have been harmed or killed by the police. And by the way, many of our community members, our strongest leaders, are in recovery themselves. We never give up on anyone, and we do recover. And I would like to say that I don't want anyone harmed who's high or drunk. Everyone deserves a chance to sober up and have a successful life.
Time has expired. Thank you, Kristen. My last speaker is Luis Chacon. Luis, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Thank you. Thank you, City Council, for hearing us out today. I do appreciate y'all taking the time to listen and engage in the presentation. I am a little confused by some speaker comments, especially as a gentleman's try to invalidate some of the work that's been done by the Reimagine group by saying that we're not other cities, we're not Berkeley, San Francisco, et cetera, but then cites Minneapolis as a supposed failed project and then as an excuse for us to not take this work seriously. So Council, I do urge you to please engage with this work. I know some of y'all have dismissed it as agenda-based and as work done by the same folks over and over, or by activists or whatever it might be. But just know that a lot of time and effort has been put into this work. It's really about being proactive with public safety and really thinking about what approaches we can take as a community to really ensure that all of our community needs are met and taken care of. And it's really about ensuring that we are utilizing the services of the police in the most productive way. Possible, sorry. And this is really to ensure that the police time is used effectively, right? And making sure that the needs of our community and our residents are met with the appropriate response, especially when police might not be necessary, depending on the situation. But ultimately, what it really comes down to is about honoring the humanity and the dignity of the residents of Richmond and even the surrounding areas. It's really about looking at what steps the city and city leaders can really take to really take this moment as serious as possible and really turn our community into a space that will foster and allow for everybody's ongoing livelihood. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was the last speaker.
Okay, can you take the, there you go, thank you. Any further comments by council members? I wanted to comment.
Okay.
You know, that was a very impressive presentation. You all have done a lot of good work, and I think it's going to be very useful. I think particularly the some of the policy reforms have been things that we've already been talking about, and as we move ahead. You know, the council authorized a task force to do this work, and I've asked each council member to nominate 3 people. So we'll be creating a task force with 21 people on it, and each of you who have participated in this effort we saw tonight are encouraged to contact 1 or more council members and ask to be appointed. But in addition to that, anybody can participate. So if you all want to participate as a group, you're welcome to. If you want to participate as individuals, you're welcome to. The meetings of the task force will be held under the rules of the Brown Act, which means they'll be publicly announced. There'll be agendas, and everyone will have a right to speak. So as we move forward, I appreciate the work you've done. I think this will give us a jump start into some of the hard work we have to do. I did want to talk about a couple of challenges, and that I'm hoping to see you all or somebody take up. And that is, you know, I noted on one of the slides that one of the objectives for people providing mental health or homeless related responses, that the responses would be the same as the police. And so, you know, right now in Richmond, we have a minimum of, you know, Richmond's broken into three districts, 9 beats, and we have a minimum of 1 police officer on each beat. and there are 3 shifts in a day. So on any given day, we're going to have a minimum of 27 different individual police officers on a beat, prepared to respond to an emergency. If we provide the same level of response for mental health and homeless issues separate from the police, it means that we have to have an additional minimum of 27 individuals available to provide that. And I don't understand how the economic model of this works. And I'm not being critical. I'm just saying I'm really curious about how that works. How when you build these capabilities, how do you make it all work, and how do you do it within the same budget we have now? Now, I've been to at least 2 different presentations, one before the city council, about the county showing us how they can provide these types of services. The county really has substantial services related to mental health already, and they have less substantial but still services related to homelessness. And they've made it clear that they are welcome to fill this void and provide these services, but they've also made it clear they're not going to pay for them. That if the city wants them, they can provide them at any level the city wants, but they're not going to pay for them. So I think one of the challenges that we're going to be looking at in the future is how does the economic model work to adapt to the kind of thing that people are suggesting. And there's been a lot of discussion about the cahoots model in Eugene, Oregon. I just looked it up. Eugene has a violent crime rate that's more than twice what Richmond's is. So they don't have the challenges with violent crime that we do. They also have a much higher property crime rate. And so how that model works for them might have to be modified to work in Richmond, because we're very different places. So I don't have any solutions. I'm just saying these are some of the issues that we're going to have to look at. Councilmember Willis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to say thank you to Councilmember Myrick and Reimagining Public Safety Group for bringing this presentation forward, because it was a long time coming. And I know that this conversation has been going on for more than a decade on how we're looking at public safety and instituting it in also a more holistic way by looking at indicators as housing, access to services, or job opportunities as some things that contribute to the lack of public safety we sometimes feel when folks are out there struggling to survive. Also, since this conversation's been happening, there's been a lot of conversation in recent years. I think the mayor kind of alluded to it, but I don't know if that's directly what he was talking about, was community members across the county have been pushing Contra Costa on the Miles Hall mental health unit and honor and recognition of what happened to Miles Hall in Walnut Creek when he came into contact with officers and was tragically killed. And we've had Richmond residents also express similar situations out here. When it came to interactions with police years prior. And I know since this conversation's been happening, I've had personal friends who have been victims of domestic abuse, and they've had to interact with the police, and they didn't have any complaints necessarily about the police officers, but they did say that whenever the police left, it made things worse for them in the ultimate long run. And, taking into consideration what our chief said about how hard it is to recruit police in general, however we do it, I think it's going to be absolutely essential that we do have some sort of mental health unit that looks at those mental health services calls, that works with homeless and works with individual and different levels of domestic violence to approach it from a mental health and holistic standpoint, rather than like, is there a law being broken here, or how can we enforce the law today? And then, our cops are forced to go to the next service call because there's already been complaints about them not being able to meet a lot of them. And that does have to do with low staffing challenges. I definitely acknowledge that. And my vision and excitement about thinking of a mental health unit in Richmond, or seeing what a Miles Hall mental health program looks in Richmond, is how can that unit alleviate some of the service calls to deal with the percentage of calls that are about mental health, the suspicious person, domestic violence, or we still got people calling cops on homeless, even though we don't criminalize homelessness out there. It doesn't stop those calls from coming in. So how do we have a unit of folks that's trained into mental health to actually really address that, so the police are alleviated the pressure of having to service every single call out there? So, I mean, this is an important conversation we need to have. I don't think this is a conversation that can just go away by ignoring it, and thinking about the implementation and how it works in the development of the model is going to be very important. And I think the presentation we just heard this evening was a very productive, constructive, and intelligent way on how to approach it, to give us a blueprint on what public safety can look like in Richmond, and how does Richmond continue to be a model on public safety in this community. So thank you so much for the presentation.
Any other comments by council members? Councilmember Martinez.
Yeah, I want to really thank the Committee on Reimagining Public Safety. That was fantastic work. It really shows me that the citizens in Richmond know how to take care of their own. They know how to think about the problems that we have, and they find solutions, or they find a roadmap that will take us to where we need to go. And I don't think it helps to be defensive about possible solutions. We need to step back, take a breath, and realize that we're all in this together, and we're trying to work together. And so I hope that everyone who is a stakeholder in this will continue moving forward. And I can actually see the work that you're doing being the model for moving forward, and it seems like you guys have already developed the ability to coordinate the kind of communication, the kind of forum building that we were actually looking at circle education to do, and I would highly recommend letting you guys take that $17,000 to reimagine public safety, and to organize Richmond into moving forward. Thank you.
Any other comments? Council Vice Mayor Bates?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to the committee, and especially you, Randy, who sort of headed up the committee. I think you made a nice presentation. I want to speak from a slight different perspective, and that is having been in professional sports for a few years, I think what the committee would be very valuable in doing is assessing what we have here in Richmond. For an example, if you have a sports team and you want to improve it to be a championship quality, first thing you do is evaluate your strengths and your weaknesses within your organization, which suggests that looking at the Richmond Police Department, and from your perspective, evaluate things that they are doing right and correct, things that they need to improve upon, which is a very important quality. And in doing so, I think that we can come forward with a more comprehensive and accurate assessment of what we need to do in the future. For an example, I don't know if anyone knows how many murders have the Richmond police committed in the last 10, 15, or 20 years. How many complaints have there been about the department reference to police brutality and so forth? And once we get that stats, then we're able to look, and you may find that you got a department that is a lot more receptive to the community than you think. And we can't compare Richmond to what is occurring in some of these other jurisdictions because it's completely different. It's apples and oranges and bananas and so forth. So I think we need to ask the police department to provide some research and give the committee or your group, and as well as a new task force that's coming forward, the statistics of exactly evaluate what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and what they need to improve upon, and how should we go forward. So thanks again for your committee's report.
Okay, any other comments from council members? Okay, I don't see any. This is not an action item.
I just want to quickly.
Randy has a
To
question.
say a quick
Mayor.
comment, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that people, that the council knows, the city know, that this is an ongoing process. This is the first of many. And we wanted to make clear that in our presentation that we are looking at data. We are looking at analysis. So like Matt Bates' comment about looking at the police and seeing what they do well and what they don't do well. And that's the point of our group, is that we're taking the data. That's why I requested data 2 months ago to have that conversation, to look at the numbers, to look at what's going on, and to make those decisions, right? This is not what Ben Taylor said, like we talk about the funding. We're not talking about the funding. It's like really looking at at every point and what we look at public safety and coming to a decision that makes sense, that's based on data, not based on emotion, based on facts, not based on what we think is going on. Like he wants to say that the Richmond police is a gold standard, but there's been a lot of cracks in that over these last couple of years. And I don't have to sit here and talk about all the stuff that's been going on, but we want to take a closer look at that data. And this is an ongoing process that we will continue to meet and we continue to have these conversations. And we hope the city will work with us with giving us that data and giving us that information so we can make these informed decisions with community members present. So we wanted to make sure that's very clear, and we hear you guys, and we want to hear from the city. We want to hear from the community members about how this process goes along. So we are continuing to, like that base. We are continuing to look at that data to the mayor. We are looking at different processes. We are looking at that question of how the county can be a part of mental health, or how the city can do it. But that takes data and looking at that. So hopefully you give us access to that information so we can make these informed decisions and present it to the community so they can make informed decisions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.